Okay, so now as we get a little bit smaller and our white space starts going away, the top and the bottom collapse at about the same point. So I think we can use the same breakpoint for both of them in order to switch over to using a single column layout for the header. So I think it's right about here where the white space makes it clear that there's a separation between the two elements to either side. So let's add a breakpoint right here at around 670 pixels. So I'm going to add a variable, and let's call this one column breakpoint. This is the same variable that we used in our site footer, and we'll set it to 670 pixels. All right, I'm going to go back to our browser. Now what we're doing here again is we're designing for the desktop first and then working our way down to mobile. What this naturally means in our code is that we would use max width at first in order to determine our breakpoints, but then we can adjust it to use min width instead to make our code mobile first, even though our design is working in the opposite direction. So once we get to our max width of 670 pixels, what we'll do is switch this element, our logo, our account and search, to both be centered on the screen. And we'll do the same thing with our navigation and our phone number. And let's explore the idea of setting the width of the logo to the width of the screen. It could be that it takes up too much vertical space, but let's play with it and find out. Now let's play with this a little bit in the browser. So I'm going to inspect our logo, and let's see what happens when we set the width on this to 100 to stretch it across. Okay, to me that seems a little bit big. Maybe when we get a bit smaller, we can bump to 100%, maybe right around 400, 450 pixels. So maybe before that, we should set the width to that 450 pixels or so, since that's about when it starts looking right. Now we'd like to be able to center this, and we can center it using the margin left and right. But before we do that, we're going to have to undo the float that we've added already. So let's do float none to override the float. And then let's set the margin left to auto and the margin right to auto. And that doesn't work yet because the image doesn't have a block display. So let's set the display to block. And once we get that, it's nice and centered. So now I think there also needs to be a little bit of separation between the logo and these items down here. So let's add a margin to the bottom of it as well. Let's do our default kind of 20 pixels. It seems to be a good spacer amount. Okay, and now let's adjust the centering and display of these items here. So we'll adjust the site header top right, and let's begin by undoing the float. So we'll do float none. And now we'd like to center this, but in order to do that, we need to set a width on the element. Now let's say we set that to 500 pixels, and then we set the margin left to auto and the margin right to auto. It's kind of centered, but it's a little bit off because if we look at the full width of this, you can see that there's some space being added to the right because we're extending this to 500 pixels, even though the content itself doesn't take up that much space. So what we can do here is set the text align to center, and that will bring it to the middle. And we just want to make sure that the alignment on our other elements, particularly our text input, doesn't accidentally get centered as well. Okay, so that works. Now, we don't necessarily need it to be 500 pixels. Let's drop this down to 400. Let's see what happens at 300. Okay, so 300 is a little bit too small. As we hover over it here, we can see that there's still a little space if we look at the blue box around our content. So we'll just keep going down until we get a break. I'm just hitting the down button until we get to where it would break. Okay, so it breaks at about 350 pixels. Let's give it some buffer, and let's set the width to 365 pixels.